President Jacob Zuma has denied that his call for a national debate on morality is based on criticism of incidents in his personal life. The president says the debate is meant to define the boundaries of moral and ethical behavior in the country. Over the past few weeks, we've invited several guests to discuss South Africa's morality, and joining us for that tonight is Jacques Rousseau. He's director of the Free Society Institute. He joins us from Cape Town. Jacques, good evening. Thank you so much for joining us here on Newsnight. Do we need to have this debate, or is it all a waste of time?
I think it's unclear. I mean, I think we do need to have the debate, but not necessarily for reasons relating to President Zuma. I mean, it's a necessary debate in the sense that people don't think very clearly about morality, and their reasons and their arguments are often very weak, generally.
Well, let's say if we were having it, we wouldn't be having it in relation to President Zuma, but the fact that the call has come from the state president and we're now trying to engage with that, what would we need to look at?
Well, I think we need to ask people to hold themselves to account in terms of giving good reasons for their beliefs and not rely on dogma or on cultural arguments where those arguments don't necessarily stand up to reason or to scrutiny. I mean, to take the Malema case, for example, in your previous insert, the quote I think I recall was, "This is who we are." That's not necessarily relevant to the case. I mean, the issue is it damaging? Is it inflammatory? So appealing to culture needs to be interrogated in that sort of context.
Are we having an informed debate about culture, though? Because one of the issues that President Zuma has raised is that people seem to look at other cultures as being superior to others.
I think that certainly needs to be discussed and interrogated, and of course it's a sensitive issue in this country, but everyone needs to realize that there's a chance that they are wrong, no matter what culture they come from. So we could all be wrong, or one of us could be wrong and the other one right. But the point is the issue isn't resolved by a mere appeal to culture and therefore leave me alone and don't question me anymore, in a sense. That's a way of evading moral responsibility rather than engaging with it.
Are we able to have a frank discussion in South Africa without sugarcoating some of the very serious issues which often make us very uncomfortable, quite frankly?
Yeah, I think the problem is that things are often polarized and made quite, in a sense, fraught with tension and the threat of violence, in a sense. So we perhaps are a bit of a way away from being able to have that frank discussion, but I'd like to see us trying to move closer towards being able to do that. And it might take a while, but we shouldn't not go down that road because it's difficult.
What are the fundamental principles on which we should base that discussion? We've spoken to a few leaders over the past few weeks. I mean, the Catholic Church said we should look to God as our guide, but of course we know that this is not a Catholic society.
Well, the problem is that religious denominations come from a pre-existing moral standpoint. So by definition, they have to be excluded from any conversation that seeks objectivity in morality. I'm happy for them to play a part, but their ball game is not objectivity. Their ball game is to defend a pre-existing dogma. So there's a contradiction there. So we can engage all sectors of society, but we should make sure to think about moral expertise in a non-dogmatized or in a non-kind of privileged sense.
Surely we need them to participate, though, don't we?
We do, but partly for political reasons, in the sense that they do, in a sense, carry a large stick and influence people. But a moral truth can't be resolved by, for example, a fear of eternal damnation. It's about harms done to people on the ground, and those are secular matters. Those are matters of who suffers and which policy causes more suffering versus less suffering. And that's not a matter for the Catholics or for the Christians or for whomever to decide.
If you were to draw this up, Jacques, what would be the starting point?
Well, we already have a wonderful starting point, and I'd suggest that that's the Constitution. I mean, I wouldn't say that I agree with literally everything, but there's a phenomenal amount of common ground there that I think most of the country does agree with. And if something is not unconstitutional, then it's got a large head start in terms of being morally acceptable, I'd suggest. If we start thinking about, I mean, for example, the issue of gay marriage is not a moral issue at all. It can't be construed as one, and that's already clear from our founding documents.
I mean, our Constitution, of course, is respected globally for its stature and what it promises South Africans. But in reality, people don't adhere to it, Jacques. So how can that be our starting point if we don't buy into it as much as we should?
Yeah, I mean, it's our starting point in terms of trying to find this common ground and motivate people to do it. And enforcement is a separate issue from seeing the sense of a particular principle. So if we can get a common ground and get people to all endorse that, and then we can try the enforcement route. The enforcement route is a separate issue in a sense, I would suggest. Yeah.
What would be the ultimate end result of all this touchy-feely stuff and this debate that we're going to have as a nation? Is it something that ultimately can then be measured, say, in 10 times that we as South Africans have moved to becoming better people, more moral people? Can we do that? Can you measure it? Can you equate it?
Well, I think that's you're illustrating quite an interesting point there, in the sense that often people think of morality as touchy-feely, and that causes them to lead to reach various mistaken points of view, such as it cannot be resolved by debate and discussion. But in this country, for example, we've got rampant unemployment and crime, and we've got a terrible education system, and those are all moral issues too. And they can be measured. If we have less corruption, if we have better educations, if we have less poverty, these are all things that can be tracked and measured. And policies that conduce to those favorable outcomes are more moral than policies that don't. And leaders who contribute to those resolutions are acting more morally in those instances than those who don't.
Clearly we don't have that climate. Clearly we don't have that climate at the moment, do we?
No, we don't. And I think that we need to stop being so tolerant of letting people get away with, for example, appealing to culture or appealing to religion. And in a case like this, President Zuma's call, we have to be suspicious, not only because of the timing, but also because the spearhead of the campaign is allegedly going to be the National Interfaith Leadership Council, and again, a religious figure who himself is morally questionable.
Thanks to Jacques Rousseau, he's director of the Free Society Institute, adding to our debate here on Newsnight. Now,